All right, great. So while people are still filing in for a little bit, we'll get started on our introductions. So we're just going to go around and have our panelists say their name, pronouns, company, position, and your clients. And if it's all right, let's start with Arturo.
Yes, of course. Hi, my name is Arturo Garcia. I'm a senior account director at Cornerstone. We are a small advertising agency that lives within this Vader magazine, and my main client is Major League Soccer.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And how about you, Caitlin?
Hello, everyone. My name is Caitlin Marino. I am the Associate Director for New Business at Sony Music Latin Iberia, which means that I sit on a regional team overseeing U.S. Hispanic efforts, but also with our teams throughout the region, including Mexico, Argentina, Colombia, Brazil, Spain, etc. I'm actually one of those people who started a new job mid-pandemic. I joined the Sony team in April, so relatively new to the team, but just a few deals in place. Currently, my first one with the team is with Michelob Ultra.
That's awesome. We're so excited to have you. And how about you, Tabo?
Hi, everyone. My name is Tabo Ngwenya. I'm the brand partnerships manager at Universal Music. I'm based out in Johannesburg, South Africa. And some of my key clients, I'd say it's the South African Tourism Board, Nedbank, which is one of the 4 major banks in South Africa. And there's quite a long list. Most recently that we're going to be adding onto our books is Reebok. We're having a chat with the global team there. So yeah, that's pretty much what I do. And thank you guys for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I want to point out that I know it's 2 a.m. by you right now, so the dedication is real.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Of course. And how about you, Layla?
Hi, everybody. My name is Layla Mustafa. I am the Global Brand Partnerships and Lifestyle Marketing Manager over at RCA Records. My pronouns are her, she. I represent our entire roster across the hip hop, R&B, but also like rock, alternative, and pop. Currently, my main clients are G-Shock and Xbox. It kind of just extends to anybody who wants to work with RCA artists.
Awesome. And how about you, Jason?
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. I'm Jason. I'm the VP of Artist Partnerships at 88 Rising. If you're not familiar with us, we're one of the leading record labels and media companies that manage Asian artists around the world. And previously, I've spent a lot of time at the intersection of media and tech. I spent time at Google, Viacom, and Disney. And I would say over the course of my career, I have worked with many different various brand partners, from Google, Microsoft, to virtual avatar type companies that is now becoming certainly more popular as we're entering into a digitally inclined space.
That's great. And last but not least, how about you, CJ? I love the background.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got to flex a little bit here. Hi, everybody. My name is CJ. I'm a brand partnership manager at TikTok. So my clients are mostly app clients. So if you use any app to tweak your voice, your sound, most likely I work with them too. I'm based in Austin, Texas, joined the team not too long ago in May. So, but then again, everything at TikTok is so new. So proud to say that I'm already part of the older force now. My pronouns is her and she. So if you want to hit me up on LinkedIn, feel free to do so.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And this is such a stacked, incredible lineup. So we're really excited to just jump right into the discussion. So I'll throw it over to Mia for the first question.
Yes. The first question is, what do you think is the most important factor to consider when facilitating a brand partnership, particularly when the artist/client is a POC and or LGBTQ plus identifying individual?
I can jump in for that one. I think in any proper, good brand partnership, alignment is so important. You never want to facilitate a relationship between an artist and a brand that just wouldn't make sense. So personally, I like to figure out politically, like, where does a brand stand, and then match them with an artist that actually makes sense. But also making sure that, like, aside from politics and just like the nuances of where we fall on the political spectrum, it's also just alignment and making sure that the artist is actually passionate about whatever the brand is, because that's typically what they get really excited about. The client is happy, the artist is happy, and I think that's like top, like probably the number one thing that I look for in a brand partner.
Yeah, piggyback off of that, I would definitely say authenticity is key for a partnership and its success. I think it's really interesting when you see an artist or an influencer say, like, I've used this product for forever, and it's like the first time you see it on their page. So I think kind of understanding, like, have they talked about this before? Are they passionate about, like, are they a wine fan and it makes sense to pair them with a wine brand? Or like, have you seen this like appear on their page before, to really kind of understand if that's something that's going to resonate with their fans, or are people automatically going to call it out and say, like, you've never talked about this before, we've never heard this, like, this looks a little sketch. So exactly like Layla said, is like just pairing it together and making sure that what the artist stands for aligns with what the brand is looking for as well.
Yeah, I think just to add on to your point as well, Caitlin, I think culture also plays a very significant role as well, and I think it's one of the key components in helping define a brand partnership, and I think culture also helps. Well, it also helps brands to become more socially conscious, in terms of what's happening around the world, what the new cultural trends are. We look at platforms like TikTok, which are now becoming predictive indicators as far as A&R is concerned, and what the new buzz is going to be, So I think those are key components. And I also just think in general, we're becoming a generation that's more focused around what do we have in common and what we have different, So I think basically leveraging that, and also just understanding what the core attributes of a specific brand are, and the core attributes of a particular artist. And obviously there are internal tools that we use, like insights tool, that help us guide us and, create more of a micro-targeted approach, or rather make more marketing informed decisions. So I think culture is a very key component, especially when we're talking consumer data and, consumer information, as well as targeting. So I think those are some of the key components that we factor in when facilitating a brand partnership.
I love that data approach. That's a heavy part of my job too. So I completely agree with authenticity, which is part of, I think, why TikTok is growing into this platform. I'm gonna stop bragging about TikTok, but this platform that encourages. I think brand really does need to have authentic voice on TikTok. Otherwise, the lifetime is gonna be shorter than those that do have connection with the audience. So on top of that, I also want to point out that I think brand image isn't always perfect. So whenever we do forge a partnership together, whether it's between brands, brand to platform, brand to user, brand to artist, everybody needs to understand that they're bringing some value to the table. So there's weird dynamics when this platform thinks that I'm stronger than the artist, so I'm bringing more value to this, which is somewhat true, but it's quantifiable in other ways, where the artist is bringing more perspective, more diverse background, where the brand does need that part of the partnership. So if you are a underrepresented artist, you need to understand your value here too.
And I just want to kind of piggyback on what Layla was saying, because I think it's actually key that the partnership that doesn't necessarily only need to work for the brand, it also needs to work for the artist. And audiences today are very easy to detect when somebody is posting an ad and is not being sincere. And people are not going to be shy to call you a sellout or call you out on your ad if it's not something legitimate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the focus on, the matchmaking between a client and the partnership, and also that focus on that inauthenticity being really tangible, not just to, other people in the industry or other clients, but the fans as well. So I think it's important to talk about that. So as a second question, people often criticize brands for only showing support for marginalized groups during their respective Pride, History, or Heritage Months. How do you ensure that the partnerships you facilitate go deeper than the surface level?
I can
jump in there. I think coming from the perspective of being an Asian record label, we have been at times pigeonholed to, we want to do a partnership for Lunar New Year, or we want to do a partnership for Asian Heritage Month in May. And those are actually temple moments for us. But I think our existence as a record label for Asian artists in the last 5 years, I think has broken through to showcase that it is always on, and we have artist releases kind of happening throughout. Like Joji, one of our artists, recently launched his sophomore album, and it was a #1 album in the US, which was super exciting. And I think some of those elements of showcasing how we're seeing artists represented even outside of these pigeonholed moments, I think are now allowing us to finally kind of break through and showcase that it doesn't have to be necessarily these months. So we have done now more partnerships really kind of throughout the year to celebrate, yes, Asian moments, but also traditionally non-Asian moments by leveraging our Asian talent.
I would say the same thing. Similar happens on the Latin end as well. We try to maybe get our foot in the door for Hispanic Heritage Month, but just not to have the conversation closed there. So I think it's taking advantage that the fact that they need to check that box, but then over delivering during the partnership, really showing the value. And then once they engage with the talent and understand what else that they can do above and beyond whatever is contractually committed to, maybe identifying other points throughout the year where we can extend the partnership, right? So if it's like a female talent, what can we do in September for Hispanic Heritage Month? But then what can we also do during the holidays? Then what can we do in the beginning of the following year for International Women's Day? Just like really kind of identifying other moments where we can maybe pull it together to not just make it a one-off, but really something that's comprehensive and continuous throughout the year.
So I think vetting is really important. I never decline or accept anything on behalf of my clients. I'll always bring whatever the offer is to the table. But I also am very honest with them. So as a Black woman, I feel like I have a duty to, my Black artists, male and female, to kind of lay everything out on the table. That being said, if I get a brand like Home Depot, for example, that is pretty conservative, doesn't really do much in the BLM space, like I probably wouldn't recommend that some of my talent participate in any like activist movement or whatever it is that they decide that they want to find talent for. So I feel like figuring out what the internal structures of a lot of these brands look like and using that as an opportunity to just like let the artist know, say like, hey, this brand wants to do X, Y, and Z. Yes, it's money, it's a bag, but at the same time, it might not be the best look given what they've done in the past. So just honesty, vetting is definitely a way to ensure that you're working with the right people.
As a account director, our role consists in making sure that the brand partnerships that you guys come up with become a reality. We come from concept to an activation, to a commercial, to a concert, to a social media post. And I believe that you can make sure that marginalized groups are represented all year long with the choices you make every day in business. When you choose a vendor, when you research the kind of photographers you want to use, you can bring your experience as a minority or as a person of color into the boardroom and use that to your advantage. And at some point it becomes your responsibility to kind of bring more people of color into the area where you're at, because you get to a point where you can make decisions on who to hire. Then that's when the brand might not see it, but you yourself know that whatever you're putting out there for people to see, there's an army of people that are of different backgrounds that can help to put that out there.
Yeah, and I think in the context of South Africa, we're a country with a lot of history, and there's a lot of dates of historical significance, and one of the two notable ones would be our Freedom Day, when Nelson Mandela was released from prison. It is a political type of date, for the lack of a better word. However, how that is translated to millennials, and it's given birth to one of the biggest hip hop festivals on the continent, which is called Back to the City. And we've invited international guest artists from your Wu-Tang Clans, etc. And I think just by creating a narrative like that, and shifting the mentality, or rather the complexity of what the date naturally stands for, it's more of a celebration for us. Another date that I could notably, mention is also the 16th of June, which is where there was a Sharpeville massacre in Soweto, where students were boycotting being taught in a different language. But when what it's translating to today, it's a day where every youth celebrates. So I think brands have also understood that and carried those narratives forward. Where we collaborated with one of the telcos in terms of telling the stories of ex-veterans or other people who were part of that movement, that uprising that happened in Soweto in 1976. So I think also brands being conscious of history as well, and there's dates of historical significance. It also helps them in terms of redirecting, or rather repositioning their brand in the minds of the consumers as well. So I think it's imperative that people bring in their insights, especially us as strategic agencies, to come in and support and help map out these strategies for these brands. So I think it's very important for us to delve deeper, as opposed to speaking to a specific demographic, but rather making it more of a unified approach and having a united front in creating these brand messages.
You guys have set such a high standard for everything. I find it really hard to add any additional point. I would just say that it's also important to be educational as a brand partnership manager. It's kind of our job to let brands know, especially from a platform perspective, if you want to be connected with users in the long term, then you need to look at this as momentum that you want to build it up to. It's not just one date. Every day you want to be under this top funnel awareness. Then if you want to penetrate deeper into consideration or to end action, it's not just from one campaign. It's really, from previous panelists that has said it, it's evergreen, it's always on.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear you sort of speak to the long game of that. And like you said, it's not just, these campaigns don't just live in a moment. It's really about the long run. So I'll pass it over to Mia to take it to the next question.
How has the nature of your work changed since the beginning of the year to now?
I think you have to learn to adapt. Adapting is the name of the game. Budgets are changing, plans are being canceled, uncertainty makes everybody uncertain, especially clients, but also everybody is on the same boat, and audiences are more receptive, and clients are more flexible to the content that was being put out there. Sometimes is not the same quality as things used to be, because before we could go out and shoot wherever we wanted to and go out and pick whoever we wanted to pick. And now the restrictions make things a lot more different. But I think in this time of uncertainty, a lot of creativity and a lot of resilience has come about. So I think adapting is a very important part of work nowadays.
I think Arturo just nailed that answer completely. I think that with just not being able to see people face to face, or not being able to have, live events anymore, or activations, and living in like this digital age, it almost forces us to get out of our comfort zone and get very, very creative in how we just with messaging, generally speaking, and keeping things interesting. Because to be quite honest with you, how many live streams can you really attend, So, and I think the key component here is that there's literally no such thing as a bad idea in the middle of a pandemic, because I think everyone is on the same boat, where we're kind of forced to redefine how we look at partnerships, how we look at marketing. Every aspect of our life has changed dramatically. So I think it's a unique opportunity where this is where all the crazy out-of-pocket ideas are welcome, because everyone is trying to figure it out together. There is no one who is an expert in this situation, given that it's the first time that any of us are ever experiencing anything like this. So just turning that into a positive and using it as an opportunity to just think outside of the box is really crucial.
Yeah, and I think behavioral marketing has become such a big thing especially with everybody being at home and consuming a lot of content, whether it be digitally or through, cable TV or whichever other avenue. But I think it's helped us understand the consumer much more better. So through those insights, we're able to map out on who's our target audience. For example, if, we put up a music video on YouTube, we can create consumer profiling, and create different pockets of understanding who the festival goers are, their age demographics, and, other variables that we consider in developing an audience for a particular brand. So I think it's helped a lot as far as insights and understanding the consumer better. Because I think, we can be honest. I think, when it comes to festival marketing, it's really hard to have a captive audience and you really have them engaged at that point. But if there is a live stream, it's easy to understand where these people are from, where the conversation is happening. So I think, from an insights perspective, it was a learning curve, and understanding our consumers better as well, and to help brands to reinforce their strategies to communicate more effectively to these audiences.
Yeah, I would just add that in my case, I feel like it's been a total 180. Like I mentioned, I joined Sony in April. I came from Latin Grammys, which is all event related, obviously the award show itself and other ancillary events that we do throughout the year. And now being on the label side and working directly with the artist, I thought it was going to be going from biz dev to biz dev was going to be a super easy transition. And it's been totally different in the sense that kind of having that direct connection with the artist gives you total creative freedom, like Layla said, to come up with any idea possible, pitch it to their team, pitch it internally, and then pitch it to the brands. And like literally something that you can think of from scratch could be the next successful thing that comes out, right? So I think to her point, like everybody has seen the live stream. So at this point, knowing that the artists, most of them are still home, like how can we leverage that time? How can we show, again, what things that they're passionate about, things that they're already doing at home? Do they love to cook? Do they love to work out? Like how can we leverage that and tie in a brand so that consumers can see a different side of the artist that, they already know their music side, they've seen that, but how can we really create like a more personal connection in this time?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting to hear each of you speak to that coming from, different parts of the world and working on such different clients and campaigns. And it seems like, a factor of commonality has been that, regardless of any of those things that the pandemic has forced us into, sort of a new way of thinking, a new work ethic, and a new sense of creativity, no matter the kind of, client or campaign that you're working on or working for. So that's really interesting to hear everyone's perspectives come together on that. So in terms of, 2020 has, as we talked about, brought us quarantine, and consumers have jumped into Fortnite concerts, to McDonald's meals, to choreographed TikTok dances, and partnerships have really pushed the boundaries in both the music and entertainment worlds throughout 2020. So in your opinion, what has been the most impactful partnership campaign of the year? And what has been the most impactful campaign you personally have worked on so far in your career? I know that's a pretty hefty question, but feel free to jump in.
Happy to jump in on this question. Kind of actually relating to the last question, this one, and how it kind of evolved into, I think, a partnership I was quite proud of at 88 Rising. I was brought on to 88 to actually work on our big moment that we were going to have at Coachella this year. And of course, when the pandemic happened, everything was canceled. And at that time, I was under contract with brands to be a part of this big moment. And actually what that was 88 Rising was invited to be a record label headliner at Coachella 2020 for the first time. And we were essentially creating this amazing showcase and was going to make it the most Asian representation at Coachella ever. We also were bringing our own music festival, Heads in the Clouds, internationally to Asia for the first time in March. And both of those things were canceled. So we all, at that time, as you could imagine, we're looking around the room with live events being a big part of what we do, just kind of frazzled. And we definitely saw, there was a lot of live streams that were happening or starting to happen in April. However, there was not a live stream that really united the Asian community, especially during a time where there was racism at its highest levels for the Asian community. So we took that as an opportunity to put together a stream to really celebrate the community And that was Asia Rising Forever that we did this past May. We streamed it across multiple platforms. And Sidra, you'd be happy to know we also did it on TikTok as well. So it did really well. And we were pretty astounded by the results, as we had 8.5 million people tune in to that festival. And on the partnerships front, I had initially spoken with Panda Express to be part of the initial program that we're doing with live events. And they actually, with everything being canceled, we kind of took a pause. So I did call back my friends at Panda Express when we were doing the live stream to see if they would want to be a part of it. And the initial response, to be honest, when I first called them in April, was because of all the racism that was happening in the US and the rhetoric being used, they were trying to be more American and less Chinese at that time, and actually initially declined, which in essence made some sense, but at the same time, it was certainly very upsetting and also just spoke to just what was happening in our crazy world. As I developed the program and kind of showcased what we were doing, which was we were putting together 24 Asian musicians from all around the world, united amidst of everything happening. I went back to Panda Express and said, like, here's what we're doing. I totally understand if you don't want to be a part of it, but I do think, for the same reason why we're doing it, we feel this is important to showcase even during this difficult time. With that new plan, as we're getting closer, that partnership was essentially signed like 5 days before we went live on May 6th, just to show you the battle between being a part of it or not. They were a part of it. One of our artists, Nikki, she's Indonesian, does R&B, did a segment of her cooking Panda Express and comparing it to the original via delivery. After it aired, I got a call from Panda Express's head of HR, and she told me that it was their most successful brand partnership in their 37-year history. So that instantly became the partnership I was most proud of.
I love the Zoom round of applause. That deserves it. That story took me on a ride.
So I can actually jump in. So similar to Caitlin, I actually started at RCA in April, fully in quarantine in COVID. And before I was at RCA, I was over at the Fader working with Arturo actually. And one of the most proudest I've been in my career is having to take Fader Fort, which typically had this, 18-year long history of being at South by Southwest. It was a physical in-person event that people got so much joy out of, and figuring out how we could still make an impact and utilize all of our brand partners digitally. I'm going to be honest, that was so hard to it was probably one of the most challenging things I've ever worked on, because at the time, early March, we all thought COVID, we would be back in work by like mid-April. It was a 2-week little break at home, working from home, and we'd be back in the office. And now I think it's a little bit easier for us to think about like digital events and how to implement brands. But at the time we were starting from square one, and I think that it was pretty successful in that we added some sort of like charitable element to it. And got like sponsors to donate food and things like that to first responders and essential workers. And I really enjoyed that partnership. The other question was, what do you think is the most impactful of this year, right? Is that what the question was? Okay,
Yes.
so do not drag me for this, and I will explain why I say this. I think that the Travis Scott McDonald's partnership is literally like brand partnerships, influencer marketing at its finest. And I feel like all of us do some sort of like influencer marketing in a way. But if you really strip down that partnership, it was a quarter pounder with cheese with the addition of barbecue sauce. So they didn't even change the menu. They didn't create like a new Travis Scott burger. It was pre-existing items on their menu that they just paired together in the way that he would order it. This incited like riots and a whole bunch of things. Like kids are tearing these McDonald's up and like doing wild stuff. And I just thought it was the most like impactful partnership because it's also relatable. And when I look at Travis Scott and I look at McDonald's, I'm like, you know what? That totally makes sense. Like he would probably order a quarter pounder with cheese and barbecue sauce, versus like the J Balvin partnership. Though it's just as impactful and it's powerful, when I look at that, I'm like, J Balvin probably doesn't eat McDonald's, but it's cool. Like it made sense. I thought it was by far one of the best partnerships I've ever seen this year.
Funny you say that, Leila. I think the most influential campaign was Travis Scott, but the Fortnite concert. I think it's like that was just mind blowing, especially we were all locked in and didn't know what to do. And then all of a sudden this out of this world concert that you never think that you'd be able to see, that's coming from a video game from Travis Scott. I thought that was incredibly smart. And whoever his team is, they're incredibly savvy because they really know how to, utilize him as a brand. And I myself, the most impactful campaign that I've ever worked for was for Tobacco Free California. And what we did is for 4 weeks, we picked up cigarette butts for all over the state of California. And then we glued them all together into a 20-foot tree stump. And then we toured that around all of California and recorded people's reaction, letting people know that, every year, more than 2 billion trees are cut down every year to make cigarettes. It was maybe not the most impactful campaign in the world, but to me, it was extremely important and just getting it out there. And I think part of the nice things about working in advertising in this world is sometimes you do get to do things that are for the good of humanity. And when you do those things, it feels good.
Yeah, I'll hop onto that because my feedback was going to be anything that's corporate social responsibility related for me really hits home. I feel like the spirits and beer brands who have been, whether doing live streams or like other initiatives and ultimately giving back to restaurants and to bartenders, has been fantastic to see. And also my colleagues have been working with the census to push the Latino submission of that information as well, which has been great. I would say then from my personal experience, again, like Leila, I'm relatively new to Sony, but at Latin Grammys for me, the work that we would do with the Latin Grammy Cultural Foundation was incredible. I myself am a product of scholarship. I went to undergrad completely subsidized by scholarship. So the foundation finds kind of like the next generation of up and coming musicians. And they even have one level of scholarship that pays for Berklee 4 years fully paid, funded by an artist, which is incredible. So the foundation will call these students and say like, hey, like play it super cash, like, hey, we just, have some news for you, whatever, like you're going to Berklee fully paid for 4 years, and the kids cry and you're there like trying not to cry with them because like you literally just changed their life. I think one year they had a student who like lived in Colombia, who had never been to the airport, had never like left his country, like lived in his small town, got selected, was at Berklee, and now is like living in LA, like living his best life. So kind of seeing that change, really like being able to affect somebody's entire life with some work that you're able to do by partnering with a brand is incredible. So to that point, I think now here on the record label side, for me, one of my passion projects is to kind of break that next, up and coming artist and to pair them with a brand and to really give them the exposure to take them to the next level. So I'd say we have an amazing girl named Nicki Nicole. She's based out of Argentina, but she's like the Latin Billie Eilish, like literally her style, her look, everything. So make sure you guys check her out. And then Nati Peluso, who's nominated for Best New Artist at the Latin Grammys this year, is also amazing. So I think kind of, especially women supporting women, which is also another passion of mine, kind of keeping those talents that nobody knows about yet, but are on the brink of becoming the next big thing, and pushing brands to kind of align themselves, with that opportunity is what I'm looking to do next.
I would also love to share my most impactful campaign, which is less to do with music, just because a lot of my clients are more utility productivity focused. So my favorite campaign is to push an app that helps dyslexia readers to listen faster. So everybody knows that you can listen faster than you can read. So how can that really help you from day-to-day life using this app? What we did was we did a lot of data analysis to show that what kind of speed we listen versus read, as well as when we couple the campaign with music, what type of music performs the best in advertisement? And does it work better with just music alone and then text overlay, or does it work better just having one voice plus voiceover as well, plus background music? So a lot of A/B testing here and there, and we managed to push them to #1 from their App Store ranking under their category in US alone. So I was pretty proud of that. And if I could nominate one campaign that I liked the most, 2020, I have to say Ocean Spray. But I loved all the examples that everybody nominated to.
Yeah, I think for me one of the most impactful brand partnerships, I think there's 3 of them, but with one artist, Travis Scott. There's a PS5 that's coming out later on this month, or rather, I think it's out already. The McDonald's, I think McDonald's was an amazing one as well. And I think because it's got, because it's in hip hop as well, it's got that nostalgic element to it where you can already think about the Big Mac campaign where Craig Mack and Notorious B.I.G. were part of the same campaign, and even I'm Loving It, the creation of I'm Loving It. I mean, Pusha T wrote I'm Loving It. So I think it's like more like passing the baton type of approach, especially in hip hop, and how that brand has always kind of like immersed or rather entrenched itself in hip hop culture as well. Fortnite was definitely one of them. And I think the Fortnite partnership was a catalyst moving into the PS5 conversation, because I think the gaming element, the gaming concepts, the gamification around it was very interesting. So I think that was one of the most impactful brand partnerships for me in my personal view. So I think one of the campaigns that I actually worked on that stood out the most for me was a Universal Music partnership with the South African Tourism Board. So South African Tourism, obviously it's a state-owned enterprise. There's obviously a lot of red tape in order for you to work with the government, especially when you're a private entity. But I think, from what we had initially pitched, we're pitching a concept around location placement, where the artist wanted to shoot a music video in, one of the hidden gems of South Africa. And unfortunately, the brand didn't see the vision at that point, and we eventually got to shoot the music video at the location without the support from the South African Tourism Board. And my argument with them was that it is going to definitely yield results in terms of profiling that specific tourist attraction. And I think just from YouTube alone, the comments, everybody was just talking about this specific location, and I think that's when they started hitting me like, yo, we messed with this video, we messed with the song. The name of the song was called Move For Me. So the entire campaign was stemmed from that. So it was a sync component into the campaign as well. The artist was a hip hop artist, Casper Nyovest, who's one of the biggest hip hop artists on the continent, arguably. So yeah, I think from that, we started, creating a campaign where we went to all the 9 provinces around South Africa. We identified fans of the artists and people who wanted to travel around the country as well. And just to see the different hidden gems, and just basically enjoying your own background, in your own country. So I think that was one of the most interesting. And I think now it's even expanding into what we're going to be doing in the West African market, the East African market, and potentially in North America as well. So I think that was one of the most, that was the highlight campaign of my year this year.
Yeah, just to not to overkill the Travis Scott campaign, but that was also my favorite as well. Up until AOC played Among Us last week and streamed that on Twitch, which I thought was just genius. They both came at the same time when, everyone was either playing Fortnite and eating McDonald's or, playing Among Us and eating McDonald's. So both just brilliant all around. And I want to thank you, Jason, as well for, sharing your vulnerable story from what was sort of a painful partnership that fell through for you to, making such an impact, and for the rest of you as well for sharing your sides of that. Great. So we're going to jump into the Q&A portion of things. Typically we bring on an attendee to ask their question. But one of the questions I found most interesting, the attendee was actually not free to ask it, so I'm going to ask it for her. Her name is Antoinette. Thank you so much for tuning in, Antoinette, and sorry you couldn't be here to ask your question, but thank you for submitting such a great question. So Antoinette's question is, how do you approach pushing a client like Home Depot, for example, to move away from a conservative space and help the brand be more experimental or align with the changing times? Does anyone have an example of how they've worked through this with a client?
Sometimes clients are what they are. And it doesn't matter how much you want to push them to do something, they won't change. So you really, the creative that you do has to really match the brand that you have in front of you. You can't try to make Home Depot this really, and I don't want to say Home Depot, they do bad advertising. They do what they do because they sell tools. You know, there's sometimes the advertising and the language has to go with what you're selling. And in order for the message to come across real, then it has to match what you're, so not all the time. And this is a fight that you're gonna fight every day, because your ideas are not gonna be ones that the clients are gonna be comfortable with. You know, when we pitched 2 Chainz to be a part of a commercial for Major League Soccer, our client was like, what does that got to do with soccer at all? You know, but then you have to fight it, and then you have to show them why is it a good idea. But sometimes you have to pick your fights, and there's clients who know what they want, and that if it's working for them, instead of fighting with them, you work alongside with them, and you use the resources to make sure that you guide them towards the direction that you want them to. But it's really not up to us to change a client. It's you have to, like, the alignment has to be there of your client and your agency for you to work at the same time. Because if you're both opposites, then there's no way for something like that to work.
I completely agree with Arturo. Like, sometimes it just doesn't make sense. The partnership it's not worth it if, like, just because a client is paying you to do something, sometimes it doesn't really, like, not every partnership is like perfectly aligned in, you know, what the objectives are for the brand in comparison to, like, what you envision for the brand. Again, like with picking your battles, taking a brand who might have, you know, they'll give you a brief and it says they're looking to target like a certain group of people, and you might know, like, this is going to work better. That's probably an argument you want to have where you push back a little bit, you show them the numbers, the facts, that kind of thing, and explain why you think that your approach is going to work better. That being said, if a brand is a little bit more conservative and they're kind of old school, they're stuck in their ways, it's probably not a fight that you're going to win. And again, I think sometimes I like to just what Arturo said, pick your battles and figure out, like, is this worth the fight right now? And sometimes the answer is no, and that is totally okay.
I was gonna say Arturo's feedback 100% first and foremost, like that hit the nail on the head for sure. But I also feel like Home Depot with music, like I never probably would have approached them for any opportunities. But right now, like Home Depot is sold out of everything because everybody is home, right? So like kind of taking advantage of the opportunity right now. So when I was growing up, which was a long time ago, but they used to do Saturday workshops with kids that you would go and like build a birdhouse or build like a little stool or something like that. And those were projects that like my mom would just take us to Home Depot to like waste 2 hours with, 3 kids in the house, but to spend a Saturday afternoon doing something. So if they still have that project, like, is there something that we can do with that? Like, do artists have kids that they like to do arts and crafts with that we can kind of bundle that together? Or like some sort of like live stream in the backyard, and in the backyard you planted a garden with plants from Home Depot, kind of just like using the moment and everything that's happening in the world right now to come up with an idea that last year wouldn't have made sense, right? So I think, it's kind of understanding the client and what they're used to, but also understanding what's going on in the world right now, and if there's an opportunity to adapt to something different that is unique and something that maybe they'd consider now.
Yeah, I think just on my side, I've never heard of Home Depot before because I think just because of the demographic. But I think in terms of companies like that, I think it's also the old economics, that they use or rather apply in terms of like the conventional way of marketing and promoting their brand. I mean, I think a typical example I think we can all relate to is Kodak. Kodak was very resistant to adapt to, the cultural trends that were happening, leveraging music. I mean, they were literally the owners, or rather the custodians of memory, of images. And I think for them not to identifying on how they can, leverage their position in the market at that time. And now today we've got platforms like Instagram, and them not being part of those conversations is also, just a typical, example of why using old economics also doesn't work in today's modern terms. So I think companies need to be, informed. I think there also needs to be more of a younger creative team that works for these companies, just to introduce them into the new way of marketing and promoting your brand. So I think old economics is quite a bit of a barrier of entry to certain companies. So yeah, I think it's just like Arturo was saying, it's just a matter of, steering them towards the right direction, but gradually doing so, and not just literally forcing them into something that they're completely unfamiliar with,
Absolutely. We're going to go into our next Q&A right now. I believe we have a question from Zainab. Hey, Zainab, can you hear us?
Hello.
Hey,
There
Zainab.
we go. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate all your time. My name is Zainab. My question is, how often do companies reach out to artists in comparison to you reaching out for collaborations?
I think it depends on the situation. It's pretty 50-50. To be honest, sometimes it's me proactively reaching out to brands because it makes sense for an artist's rollout plan. But other times I get a brief from directly from the brand, and they're asking for a specific artist, and sometimes they're asking for recommendations based on like a certain criteria. So I think it really just depends on the brand, and it depends on what they're looking for, but also depends on what you have going on internally and if it makes sense to kind of go out there and seek it yourself.
Yeah, I would agree with Layla. It really depends on the project and what you have in front of you. But we're always, especially at the Fader, we're always looking for new talent, because new talent it's a lot more affordable than a Travis Scott. And in the future, like the young talent it's the future. However, it's hard to know exactly when you're going to need somebody. Like the planning, it's difficult, but it's not impossible. And Layla, I don't know if she'll attest with me, but when we were at the fair, we would constantly be getting emails and CDs and all those things that then some people might ignore, but some people don't. I read the emails and I read what people were sending me, and I listened to demos and I send it to people. So it's really, it's luck sometimes.
Yeah, I would just say that like the ratio of inbound and outbound really is down to the stage of the company too. Like whatever we do at TikTok right now versus 2 years ago when we were Musically is probably very different too. And when you rely a lot on inbound, it needs to meet a certain threshold for you to be able to say how many of these inquiries you are processing every month. And once that number drops below certain threshold, then you just don't have control over the workload and the resources that you have in order to, I guess, forge a partnership. So for you to really maintain the quality of your work, I like to do more outreach just so that I have more control of what I do and speak to more people in this industry too.
Absolutely. I'm sure, you can't get to every email or every pitch in your inbox. And thank you, Zainab, so much for that question. So we do have one last Q&A coming up from an attendee named Chloe. Oh, looks like we had her and then we lost her.
Hi, panelists. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, thank you, Chloe.
Awesome, thanks. Thank you guys so much for donating your time today. It's been great to hear from you. I'm wondering how much partnership ideation comes from creative brainstorming versus drawing closely from analytics and data, and how have you personally been able to leverage data to inform your campaigns?
Happy to jump in here. I think it's a mixture of it all. I mean, there's no exact science. But I think oftentimes the most authentic partnerships come starting from the artist and what they want to do. So, you know, in terms of working with our artists on our roster, I like to ask them, like, what is your daily routine, or what do you like to do from a fitness perspective or a food perspective, and kind of seeing their individual likes and dislikes, I think helps kind of formulate what could be an authentic campaign. You know, multiple times on this panel, we kind of talked about the authenticity, because, you know, it could take one partnership to end someone's career, or like one statement, especially in this time where one thing you say gets retweeted and then it could trend. So if it comes from an authentic place, I think that could lead you to a partnership that feels more authentic and certainly resonates, I think, with your fans and audience.
In the case of us at the Fader and with MLS, majority of our partnerships come during the creative ideation. We kind of come to the creative team and the strategy team, and we tell them what the brief is. We tell them how much money we have and what the goals are for the client, and then that's how we kind of come up with the partnerships. I'm sure that other people might use analytics, but for us with the Fader, the people come to us because they think we have a pulse in culture and we know what's coming. So it's more of a gut feeling with us, but sometimes that gut feeling could be wrong. So analytics also help.
Yeah, I think in our case, it's also more, you know, as Arturo said, it's more about the creative part, the creative ideation of the concept, but also, you know, relying a lot on platforms like TikTok, for example. You know, I know there was one of the artists, not even just for brand partnerships, I mean, just in general in terms of signing new talent and what the new wave is, you know, and it kind of helps reposition a brand, because, you know, generally with brands, there's two passion points: it's sports and music. So you'd find that a specific brand might be positioned within a specific genre, for example, hip hop, and you'd find that on TikTok it's translating to a different demographic. So I think platforms like that also help us in terms of making informed decision. I think it was one of the songs that were one of the biggest breakouts of 2020 in South Africa was a song called Jerusalem, and became just a huge global sensation, to a point where Cristiano Ronaldo even used it on his IGTV post, you know. So it's things like that where, you know, again, the convergence of sports and music, and leveraging a platform like a TikTok, but also, you know, heavily reliant on your creative intuition in terms of execution. So I think those are some of the key elements. And you know, just to Jason's point, I think it's a perfect blend of all these elements coming together and working in harmony.
And then on Sony Music Latin's end, we actually have an entire business intelligence team dedicated to reviewing segmentation information and understanding kind of where our artists' followers are, what they do, and what's trending. So I feel like once we are either receiving a pitch and or trying to pitch somebody, we always try to reference that data to make sure that the artists that we're suggesting are in line with whatever the brand is trying to accomplish. But I think it's also paired with whatever creative idea you want to pitch. So you want to identify the top 5, you know, artists that align with XYZ demographic, and then here's what we think we can use them, and here's our ideas on you know, for the campaign itself. But I think it's a combination of having both, and otherwise going with your gut feeling.
And I was going to call on you, Sija, and say, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I know that, you know, you mentioned a lot of what you do is the digital advertising end of things. So I was curious to hear your perspective on it as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think there are different type of advertising. The one that's more of an one-off campaign. So it really depends on the nature of the campaign. So like, you know, Jason's Panda Express campaign is probably not going to be repeated every month, versus an evergreen campaign that's running on auction about a new album that's coming out for maybe 2-3 weeks. You'll be running for that, and then you can refresh that campaign as well whenever you do need to refresh that. So that really depends on the type of campaign and the scalability behind it. If it's a campaign that you want to apply to multiple brands, say like in the volume of 1,000, 10,000, then we definitely want to back it up with number. That being said, I know a lot of times brand want to ask me the question, is this music, trending music gonna help? It really depends. Is this music gonna tell your story? If it's not gonna tell your story, it doesn't matter if it's a trending music or not, because it's just not gonna resonate with the user, and it doesn't fulfill the picture altogether. So that's my 2 cents.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Chloe, for joining us and for submitting such a great question. We really appreciate it.
Well, with that, thank you all so much for coming and attending, and to our wonderful panelists, thank you so much for your time. For those of you new and have never attended a panel of ours before, you can follow us on our social media. It's just at Colored Music Collective for everything, and you can find out when we announce the details of our next panel. But with that, thank you all so much for coming, and have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you so much, everyone.